He was supposed to break her. That was the rule of the obsidian citadel. Instead, the air burned with the blistering heat of an incoming blast, and the sovereign of Voria threw his massive, armored body over hers. The floor violently buckled. Dust and debris rained down on them, but all Kira Vance could feel was the heavy, thudding rhythm of Kalen's hearts pressing against her ribs. Two hearts beating in a terrifyingly synchronized frenzy against her chest. A forced alliance, they had called it, but there was nothing forced about the way his hand locked into her hair, shielding her fragile skull from the falling stone. Truth is, 30 minutes ago, the idea of Kalen touching her would have made her reach for a blade. The grand hall of the Citadel had been designed to make humans feel incredibly small. Massive pillars of dark, polished rock scraped a ceiling lost in dim light. Kira had been escorted down the central aisle, surrounded by guards whose armor clicked with cold, predatory precision. She was there to execute the ceremonial signing of the Resonance Pact, a political necessity, a human bound to an alien king to keep a fragile peace. The Vorian nobles hadn't even tried to hide their disgust. As she was formally positioned before the high altar, she felt the prickle of their stares, sharp with centuries of unquestioned dominance. Then came the metallic hiss of drawn blades. Several high-ranking lords had stepped out of the periphery, weapons unholstered, physically attempting to block the ceremony's completion. They didn't want a human in their court. They certainly didn't want her bound to their sovereign. Kalen stood tall on the dais. His angular features were unreadable, his dark eyes locked solely on Kira with an electric heat that made her pulse jump. The ritual command echoed through the vast space, demanding she drop to her knees. But Kira planted her boots and physically stepped away from the altar. She was supposed to kneel. Instead, she brought the obsidian citadel to its feet. She kept her chin high, refusing to lower herself in a room full of people waiting for her to bleed. She had no idea what she was walking into, really, but she knew she wouldn't do it on the floor. Bound by the Resonance Pact, ruled only by herself. The quiet that followed was absolute. Blades shifted, breaths caught. And then Kalen did the unthinkable. He raised a single armored hand. His royal guard immediately fell back, dismissed without a single word. He stepped off the dais, way slowly, deliberately. He descended to confront her alone, closing the distance until he stood just inches away. The height difference was staggering, the kinetic energy rolling off his skin intoxicating. He wasn't looking at her like a possession. He was looking at her like an equal who had just passed a test she didn't know she was taking. Surviving the sovereign was only the first test. He leaned in, his voice a low, vibrating hum that rattled right down to the marrow of her bones. A dangerous defiance, he murmured. The sound meant only for her. Before she could snap a remark back, the floor ripped open. An explosive device, launched by a hidden faction within the very court that surrounded them, detonated at the base of the altar. The world turned to deafening noise and shattered glass. And Kalen, Orn, instead of diving for the safety of his throne, moved faster than humanly possible, straight for her. The ground simply vanished. Kira felt the stomach-dropping rush of freefall, swallowed entirely by Kalen's grip as they crashed into the pitch-black depths of the Citadel's subterranean vaults. The impact rattled her teeth, but his armor absorbed the brunt of it. Dust choked the air. Heavy blast doors slammed shut far above them, followed by the undeniable thud of magnetic locks engaging. They were buried alive. The rebel faction had sealed them in the dark. Kalen slowly pushed himself off her, his breath coming in sharp, labored pulls. He reached blindly in the dark, his large hand finding her shoulder, checking for broken bones. The heat radiating off him was intense, a stark contrast to the freezing stone beneath her. But Kira wasn't waiting for a rescue. She rolled to her feet, pulling a shattered piece of a guard's comlink she'd snagged during the fall. She knelt by the massive glowing control panel embedded in the rock wall. Vorian tech was ancient, elegant, and entirely reliant on genetic signatures. It turned out it was also highly susceptible to raw, unregulated electrical feedback. She stripped the wires with her teeth, spitting the casing onto the floor. She jammed the exposed copper straight into the panel's primary relay. Sparks bit into her fingers, burning her skin, but she didn't let go. She twisted the circuit, feeding the vault's own security grid back into the localized blast doors above. The system shrieked. A secondary detonation echoed upward as the rebels' own barricade blew outward, turning their trap into a fragmentation mine against them. Light flooded down the shaft, and with it, the remaining assassins. They dropped into the vault, weapons raised. A lethal pulse of raw plasma flared from a rifle, aimed directly at the back of Kira's head. She barely had time to turn. Kalen stepped into the trajectory. The blast hit his chest plate with a sickening crack, dropping him to one knee. He let out a low, guttural snarl that shook the ground. And then he launched himself forward. He grabbed the faction leader by the throat, moving with terrifying speed, slamming the rebel against the jagged rock wall until the fight completely drained from the cavern. He didn't just protect her, he claimed her survival as his own. Hours later, the smoke hadn't even cleared from the Grand Hall. The court had reconvened, and though the ranks were noticeably thinner. Blood stained the polished floor. Kalen stood before the high altar once more, his armor scorched, a deep gash weeping dark blood down his jaw. He didn't ask her to kneel this time. He took her hand, his fingers completely engulfing hers. He pressed the sovereign's seal, a burning, heated ring of pure energy, onto her wrist. It seared her skin, leaving a permanent, glowing mark of the resonance pact. Kira didn't flinch. She accepted the seal, turning her back to the terrified nobility, and took her position beside the throne. She was an equal now. But the quiet didn't last. The massive stained glass windows of the hall suddenly shattered inward, blown apart by a shock wave. Outside, a massive rebel warship broke through the atmosphere, eclipsing the twin suns. The Empire was fracturing. Kalen's hand brushed hers, his thumb tracing the new burn on her wrist. The real war had just begun,